This is Tika Lark Fleming with the Black Girl Show. Up next, we're going to have Lili Bernard. Who we're going to talk about art and talk about Karen Walker. So, we're going to have a break in a little bit.
This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
I live the simple life. I am a socialite. I got no appetite. Ain't got no cellulite. Got a disorder.
All right. All right, we're back with Lili Bernard, who is an artist, organizer. She's a curator. You do a lot of things, Lili. You're a great painter. You're a great conceptual artist. You're a great planner of events. You do Bela, which is kind of brings African American artists and connect them with major museums like LACMA and Getty and all that kind of stuff. But today we're here to talk about whose job is it to educate the public in regards to racism and sexism in the art world. We're going to talk about, specifically Kara Walker's work, Subtlety. If you could put that up, my engineer, Richard. And we're going to kind of talk about, the response people had to that. Maybe you want to start and kind of like what was kind of like your opinion on that, and what are your thoughts on that?
If you don't mind, before I answer that question, I want to say that you're doing a great job
at
educating people about issues of racism and sexism. So I can't thank you enough. You're a fantastic, brilliant force.
Thank you, Lili.
Tika Lark Fleming. Speaking truth to power, power to truth.
I'm embarrassed, but we have, but we need to talk about you.
I just want to say that it's peculiar that you would ask me that question, because I've never even had the privilege of looking at Kara Walker's work in person.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
No, I have not. Oh, actually, I have. At the Hammer, my emperor, my what's it called? My enemy, my oppressor, my love. At the Hammer, I saw that, and I thought that was an interesting. The thing I think that was interesting about her work was that when I saw African Americans saw it, when African Americans would look at her work, it seemed like they were very kind of disturbed. In addition, which was kind of like different than your work in regards to when people see it, while it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, it seems to be less uncomfortable for African Americans and maybe a little bit more uncomfortable for white people. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of like the issue some people have with Kara Walker's work. Like, who is she trying to shock?
I guess I'd kind of like to answer that with a question to you, because I have not physically seen her work. I've only been able to enjoy it digitally, through books and online. When you saw her work, did you have some kind of a visceral, emotional reaction to it, which often happens to me when I see a work that really moves me in person? I have a reaction that becomes so visceral that it becomes physical. I might weep.
Yeah.
Or I might become so disgusted I have to walk out of the room. I haven't had that reaction yet with her artwork, that I feel like I have to close the page of the book. But I was wondering, did you experience that?
I think what I experienced, even though, I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but what I experienced when I kind of saw her work, I felt it was interesting to watch other people's reaction to it. I didn't have an actual reaction to it myself. Mm-hmm. It was a feeling of how I was watching other people and their reaction to the work. I actually have a visceral reaction to your work. Every time I see your work, I guess because I see so many gimmicks, and I'm not trying to say that Kara Walker has a gimmick. I'm not trying to say that. Maybe I am saying that. But, I feel like your work, it feels like I feel a kind of connection to your work. And sometimes when I look at Kara Walker's work, and I feel horrible saying this, because I don't know, to me she's right on that edge between between making a statement and between it being a gimmick. So I think that's kind of the but when I did see her at the Hammer, it did seem to be, everybody seems, it seemed to me the people that she was trying to to educate did not seem to be being educated by it. But that's just me. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it.
Right, and then the question, of course, is as artists, is it our duty to educate? But I asked you that question because I read some articles that I shared with you, and others have shared with each other, that some black journalists wrote about visceral reactions that they had when they saw the work, relating more to how some white people were reacting towards the work, that they were not understanding the issues that the work was raising, and they were posing with the sculpture in in ways that were mocking, making fun of the vulva, and saying very derogatory comments, and that these black journalists, when they saw this totally ignorant and unaware reaction of some of the white people, they became very emotional. And I can only imagine how I would have felt had I seen the work. I was in New York just like a week after it closed, and but I imagine that I would too have a visceral reaction, not just about how some white people might react, but about the posture of the sculpture. And that's something I would like to talk about. But before I say that, I want to say that I want to regard Kara Walker with extreme respect and deference, and she's very iconic in that she's a black woman, and she was perhaps the youngest person to have won the MacArthur Award back in 1997, the same year that Kerry James Marshall won it. And she was about the same age that Bell Hooks was when she wrote this book, Ain't I a Woman? And I bring up this book because there's a whole chapter in there that Bell Hooks calls the continuing of the devaluation of black womanhood. And I raise this question to you as to the posturing of her. And to me, when I see that posture, it screams of rape, of submission, of the role that black women have played in terms of being quote unquote sexual latrines, as Bell Hooks writes in her book, and how we as black women from the beginning of slavery have had very little control over our destiny, and we by no means as black women slaves could decide with whom we would have sex. And there's some things that I wanted to bring up with the New York Times article about the piece that were kind of misleading. What's interesting is, back in 1997 when Kara won that MacArthur Award, Betty Starr, our Southern Los Angeles, our California,
yes, Pasadena, yes,
Los Angeles-based artist, she had this, very famous piece here, right? The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, and this piece is really interesting to me. I mean, Kara claims that this is kind of a bit of a self-portrait because her features are quite similar, but clearly she has the rag on her head, which of course is symbolic of the nanny. And what's really interesting to me is that why Betty Starr would criticize Kara Walker when she herself used an image of a nanny that has kind of buffoonish, characteristics. And I guess she felt that perhaps Betty Starr is empowering the Aunt Jemima by giving her a rifle in her hand. And but this is what I want to talk about. The New York Times, they said something which I think is doesn't make much sense. They mentioned that Kara Walker wrote that sugar crystallizes something in our American soul. It is emblematic of all industrial processes and of the idea of becoming white being equated with pure and true. It takes a lot of energy to turn brown things into white things, a lot of pressure. So when I read all these articles that were written about the piece, when I heard Kara Walker talk in the PBS video, there's talk about the colonized black psyche with regards to the white European standard of beauty, but there's no reference to the role that the black woman played in terms of being, in terms of fulfilling, white male sexual privilege. And I don't know why that's not addressed in the piece. That's what that sound was. Yeah. But Creative Time normally puts on these exhibitions that are of the social practice form. They're dialogical. There's a lot of conversation. I wasn't there, so I don't know if they spoke about the sexual role that black women played. But to me, when I look at here, when I look at the when I look at the pose, okay, she's not in a very, to me, she's not in a very empowering pose. To me, she isn't a submissive pose. She's like in the downward dog position. She's presenting her rear end as if she's ready to be raped. So, but I want to say, however, that although there are a lot of contradictions that I see with the piece, however, that I have to give deference to Kara Walker for bringing to the table the discussion of these topics of race, and however she presents, the sexual exploitation of Black women, she brings the discussion to the table, and that's very important. So
that's the thing I think that's interesting to me about Kara Walker. She seems to be like right on that line where you're kind of like, whoa, yeah, she did bring that up and that's good, but at the same time you're like, oh, well, maybe she should have done, but of course she's an artist, so that's kind of like, what's an artist's job? Like, what's her? I mean, is it if you are a Black artist, if you are a woman artist, and you're doing art? I mean, is there any responsibility at all, or is there none? It's just kind of like, if you get it, you don't. I don't have to explain anything. I mean, what do you think?
I think that responsibility. I think I guess I would rather use the word opportunity, that you would have an opportunity to educate. What I wanted to say before I go to that this contradiction here that the New York Times said, they said, this is the New York Times saying that the figure may be wearing a mammy's kerchief, but she'll never be beaten into submission. And that to me is ridiculous, because she looks to be in a very submissive pose to me, like that downward dog pose with her rear end enticing whomever or presenting itself, But I think, I when I look at the works that I do, where I take these classical European paintings, and I alter them to tell slave stories, they're really heavily codified with like Afro-Cuban folklore and religiosity. And my professor, Charles Gaines, was my professor this past year. I just got my MFA at Otis. Yay. And he was my independent study professor. But he talked to me a lot about giving access, about that I should provide some kind of understanding to people who don't understand what Afro-Caribbean folklore and religion and what the Orishas are. So I wonder if, for example, if either Kara Walker or Creative Time were to talk about the issue of rape, of that Black women as slaves were raped all the time, and this speaks about that. Would they therefore, be taking these pictures, and did they miss out on an opportunity to have discussion, to educate white people about, the abuse, the sexual abuse of Black women? I don't know. But at the same time, their not having done it illuminates the tremendous divide that many white people are totally oblivious to the the objectification and the of exploitation of Black women. So I don't know.
No, it's true. It's that's the whole thing. I mean, that does look like, it's a sexual. It looks like a sexual pose, but yet it seems like no one's. The only people who addressed it were the people on Instagram, which that seems very. Well, it's kind of like, well, they didn't understand it, but maybe they did understand it. Maybe that's why they did it, because they did understand exactly what it was. Right,
and it's kind of ironic, because this was clearly a departure from her work. She she's been criticized for being repetitive with her silhouettes, and that this is clearly a departure, and yet it's still very sexual. And I thought it was interesting that, as sexual as her other works were, that nobody talked really about the sexuality of this piece in terms of the main, the press. But then, however, I don't know, when she did that PBS video, perhaps she did mention something about the element of Black women being raped generationally, and maybe it was edited out. I don't know.
That's the whole thing. Maybe we don't know what, that's what I'm saying. Is it, but I mean, I think you kind of, I don't know, can we show a picture of Lillian's work? Okay. I showed the picture, Caroline, of your work, which, it's very strange. Every time I look at your work or go to, I remember I went to your MFA project about the hair, I always find myself slightly disturbed by you, not in a bad way, but in a kind of like, I'm in Los Angeles, I see so much art, and I see so much BS, so much like, let me do a gimmick. This'll work, and your stuff is never gimmicky. It's always like very authentic and always very real and harsh, which is really strange because this is Los Angeles. You never really see anything real, you know. So it is kind of shocking. Like I have to say, I had to go home. I'm so sorry. The name of your thesis project.
The name of my thesis, the hairpiece.
The hair.
It's Dawning and Dismissal of the Conqueror's Coiffure.
Yes, I actually, after I left that, I had to actually go home. I think I had to go home for like a day and like just stay. I had to like go to sleep. I had to like go to bed and go to sleep for like a day. That was very stressful. The whole experience, and which is strange. I don't know if you knew that, but that whole experience was very stressful for me to just watch it. Just the whole, they were wetting their hair. During her piece, they actually, her conceptual art piece, people were wetting their hair, and like it was going from straight to natural, like Afro, black hair. And then I remember it was a little girl that was there. And she had an intellectual challenge, and I remember because
her name is Clark.
Clark. Okay. I remember she did not want to wet her hair because she wanted to be pretty, and I thought that was really disturbing to me because it was just, you know, there was no pretense there. It was just kind of like, I'm not doing that because I want to be pretty, and I'm not going to wet my hair. And she was like, no, and I don't know why that stood out in my head, but it did. And even your work, Carolyn. I mean, I'm always kind of like looking at that. I mean, can you explain that work? Because I mean, they show it on the picture on the screen. I mean, can you explain it? Because you always explain your work. That's the whole thing. Is great about you. You always explain your work.
That work is inspired. By the story, the real story of my great-grandparents. My great-grandmother, Caroline, was a dark-skinned black maid-servant for my great-grandfather, William Bernard, who was a rich white stagecoach designer in Kingston, Jamaica. And so somehow or other, she bore 3 children through William. William was married and had children, white children. And I and some members of our family assumed that she was raped. Under that situation. However, my mother reminds me that perhaps it was consensual. I don't know. But I think one of the wonderful things that Kara Walker does with her work, as controversial as it is that it illuminates these psychoses, these paradoxes, these pathologies of slavery. The work that looks really satirical, and it's very complex. And I can only imagine the complexity of it. So that piece is hard for me to talk about because my parents, they're really upset about me having made that. They it's nobody's business as to how my father's mother was conceived in this world. But I'm like, this is the story of most people like me who are, black and mixed with European blood. But I say to my parents, why would you criticize me for representing the truth, and Juno Walker, Juno Diaz, one of my favorite authors, writes. He was interviewed once, and he's been criticized about using. Can I say the N word? Can I say the real word, or do I have to say the N word?
You could say the
word.
You could say the word
because for representation's sake, nigger. A word that I was called very frequently growing up and as a young adult. And he's been criticized about using the word nigger in his novels. And he's like, well, why criticize me for representing my reality? And so why would people criticize Kara Walker for representing the reality as she sees it, the complexity of slavery? I know that some of the she talks. I mean, there's a video that she has where she and her daughter or something say, I wish I were white, or I want to be white. But this is the reality. Aren't a lot of black women saying that they wish they are white when they go around with straight hair? Aren't they saying that? And so therefore, because Kara Walker puts it in words, she's, it's easier to criticize her than it is to criticize all these sisters walking around with straight hair and weaves. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's not the same thing.
It is. And so I have to say, we are. I'm going to ask for you to kind of like give me one more, like, what's something that, you know, we're actually going to wrap it up.
All right.
I was talking to you so long, and I'm looking like, oh my God, we're out of time. I didn't even realize it. But you know, thank you so much for coming, Lili. I mean, you actually, you know, said a lot of really important things. You have an event coming up this weekend,
this Saturday at Mac Leeson's studio. Yeah, it's some painters. Some painters we're going to be talking about art at Mac Leeson's studio in Chinatown. Coagula curatorial.
I swear, you always make me go into the zone. I don't even know what's going on. Every time, even when I see your art, I'm like, I go into the zone. I'm like, okay, why am I doing that? I don't know. You are a very powerful person. I mean, you know, you offer a lot of power, and so I'm very happy to have you here and to be able to talk to you. So that's going to be it for the Black Girl Show. I hope you guys are okay. I'm actually a little bit disturbed now. I hope you're okay. Every time I talk to her, I'm always a little bit disturbed. But that is it for the Black Girl Show. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Lili. Thank you, Richard Carr, my engineer. I told you I'm going to remember to thank you next time, so I remembered this time. Next time, we're going to have Matt Gleason. We're going to be talking about the future of LA art, and we're going to be talking to Sally Hampton, and we're going to be talking about net neutrality. So that will be pretty much the show. So thank you so much for joining us with the Black Girl Show. See you next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And have a great evening.
Piece of sugar cane, sweet to the core, that's right, I got a real bone. My great-grandma didn't like the foxtrot. Now instead she spit, it's nothing boogie jam on jam. Spit on. They say I'm different 'cause I eat chitlins, and I can't help it, I was born and raised on them. That's right, every morning after slop the hogs, and they be getting off, humping the Jolly Hooker. Get it on. They say I'm different 'cause I'm a piece of sugar cane, and when I kick my legs, I got real bum. My great-grandpa was a blues lover, he be rocking his moonshine to B.B. King and Jimmy Ray. Rock on that. And that's why they say I'm different. And that's why they say I'm strange. I'm talking about Big Mama Pump. Lightning Hopkins. I'm talking about Howlin' Wolf. I'm talking about Albert King. Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry. When I was sweet 16. And that's why they say I'm different. I'm talking about T-Bone Walker. I'm talking about Muddy Waters. I'm talking about Lead Belly.
Thank you for tuning into LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network, original reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Stay tuned.